Since the age of the light drift rings, the Morvians had been known as the leading species in all domains. Living crystals, symbiotic intelligence, the ability to manipulate quantum magnetic fields with mere thought. They did not fight. They didn't need to. The entire galaxy bowed to their power as one might bow to a storm sent from the future. And in the oldest archive, stored in ultra-long-wave echoes, there existed a single line of burning red code, locked within the highest echelon of consciousness. Under no circumstance shall humanity be awakened. No reason, no explanation, just the order, and all obeyed. The Omega-17 class archaeological vessel of the Morvians drifted to a halt before an object suspended at the edge of dead space. An ancient rusting ship, marked unmistakably with the sign of humans, a species once thought to be asleep forever. Chief Commander Valen, a brown-red crystalline entity bearing the memory of 3 generations, hovered silently within the command sphere. Since the days of the Nalari Empire, he spoke, his voice resonating through the acoustic core, humanity has vanished, and every remaining race agreed on one thing: let them sleep. The vessel's data was recorded. Its outer hull was decayed, yet the interior systems remained perfectly operational. A self-sustaining biosphere, dormant chambers arranged in a spiraled spatial loop, their pulse lights blinking like a heartbeat in deep coma. Junior analyst Trelix, a half-biological entity freshly graduated from the Institute of Hybrid Experimentation, could not hide his curiosity. Just primitive biology, Trelix said. They've slept for 1,000 years and still maintain core heat. With what? No resonance tech? Valen gave no answer. Instead, he opened the ancient archive and projected a command from the first civilization onto the screen. We once saw them awaken. Once. And that was the only time every star chart had to be redrawn from scratch. Trelix chuckled lightly, unconvinced. You're referring to legends. There's no verified record of that. That was not a legend, Valen replied, his gaze reflecting the faint glow of the human vessel. That was law, and law exists because someone once dared to break it. Valen hadn't said it to threaten. He said it to warn. But the chill in his voice could not penetrate the heat surging within Trelix. A hunger to know. Just one particle scan, Trelix murmured. I won't touch anything, won't breach the pod, just data. That, Valen snapped, is how every mistake begins. Trelix fell silent, but the light flickering within his biosynthetic pupils didn't blink out, not from fear but because he had already calculated the risks. That night, if the Morvians even had a concept of night, Trelix slipped silently from his rest chamber. He didn't activate the main systems. Instead, he used a standalone scanning module, hand-coded since his academy days. No signal transmissions, no trace left behind, just a reading. Trelix targeted a stasis pod nearly hidden within the outer hull of the human ship. Just a fragment, he told himself. A heat sample, an electrolyte map, a single biocycle rhythm. The first scan fired, a thread of light so thin it was practically invisible. But the human system didn't wait for the second. Snap, a soft sound, like a finger flicked through a vacuum. He looked up. The ship's hull pulsed with a brief light, everything stilled. Then it began to move. First came the sound, a low hum like the breath of some colossal being inhaling after a slumber that outlasted planets. Then the lights, strips lining the ship's interior blinked on, not flickering, not dim, but in flawless sequence. "No way!" Tralix backed up, the controller module dropping from his hand to the floor. The nearest pod began to open. No hiss, no alarms, just awakening. A pod unfolded. Inside, a human. No support equipment, no wires, no neuroshock dampeners, just a human. Opening his eyes, Trelix froze. He couldn't turn, couldn't breathe. That gaze, not hostile, not erratic, just calm. Unnervingly calm. The human looked directly at Trelix, as if he knew exactly who the Morvian was. Then he spoke, his voice hoarse, low, but clear with every syllable. "What kind of world was foolish enough to wake us up a second time?" The question came without an exclamation mark. No growl, just a truth, spoken aloud, cold as a death notice carried by wind through a barren world. Trelix swallowed hard. He wanted to answer, wanted to scream that it wasn't intentional, that it was just an academic scan. But his mouth wouldn't move, because in front of him stood a human. No weapon, no armor, no support system, just will, raw, unfiltered, the kind that existed before even language had form. "You weren't the decision," the man said, his gaze slicing through Tralix's neural recognition layers. "You were just the last drop on a fracture that's been spreading for a long, long time." And then the other pods began to open. No alarms, no hissing steam, no systems breaking. They simply functioned. Each pod revealed a person sitting up. Men, women, young, old, human faces, carved with the weight of deep slumber but untouched in their humanity. Trelix began to tremble, not out of fear but from the overwhelming sense that he was watching history itself rise from beneath centuries of dust. Aboard the Morvian vessel, Valen was scanning data streams when the primary lighting changed color. Not red, not yellow, but white-gray, a spectral code that had never been activated in the ship's entire operation history. "Where is Trelix?" he asked, his crystalline voice echoing against metal walls. No answer. Instead, a secondary signal activated, a communication band, ancient format. Protocol, first flow standard, language, pre-trans, encryption, human binary. Valen froze. He slowly approached the console. A single sentence appeared, like the opening line of a new era. "The pause in our journey has ended. We are returning." In the human vessel's central chamber, Trelix stood motionless amid thousands. Waking. No one shouted, no one rushed, yet each breath they drew seemed to carry new gravity. The first man, the one who had spoken the initial words, stepped closer to Trelix. No threat, no smile, just a question. "How many worlds have learned to forget us?" Trelix's voice cracked. "All of them." The man nodded, then turned and walked toward the center of the ship. No commands, no rallying cry. Yet behind him, every single one followed. No gunfire, no bloodshed. But the entire galaxy had just received a signal deeper than any war. Humanity has awakened. And they remember. The door at the end of the corridor opened, as if the ship itself had just awakened. No one gave a command. No one touched the control panel. By their mere presence, the central recovery systems powered on automatically. Trelix stood there, still unable to comprehend why they weren't angry. Why these people, forgotten, cryogenically sealed by their own kind, weren't screaming, weren't unleashing their wrath. No one raised their voice, yet every step they took echoed through the corridor like some unknown gravity crushing down on his lungs. A force not of physics, but of intellect. Aboard the Morvian vessel's command deck, Valen felt it, before the systems confirmed it. Central waveform sync fluctuation spreading outward. Level top secret, ancient cognitive core. Model sentient geometric pattern reactivation. Designation human core 1.0. He stepped back, the light within his crystalline form shifting color. For the first time in hundreds of cycles. It can't be. An aide broke down in harmonic sobs, the resonance shattering nearby sensor columns. They're not just awake, they're in control. Not through artificial neural nets, not through foundational data, they remember. On the human vessel, the command nexus came to life. A vast well of data swirling with plasma spiraling across spatial axes. The first one, the one who triggered the reactivation, placed a hand gently on a control panel. All green lights blinked on. Then words appeared, like the first heartbeat of a cosmic heart stitched back together. Confirmed. It is time to begin post-evolutionary galaxy assessment. Another human, female, silver-haired, her voice dry but precise, strode past Tralix. What species are you? I'm Morvian, Alpha-class bioanalyst. Morvian, she repeated. Last time you were barely stabilized plasma dust. She smiled, not mockingly, not with malice, just a truth, cold as mathematics. How many star systems survived the Deep Shadow period? Deep Shadow? Trelix's voice cracked. No one answered. They simply exchanged looks. Not panicked, not rushed. They were remapping the entire known galaxy with their own minds. No external tech required. In the outer atmospheric shell, galactic communication networks began receiving a low-frequency wave. Structured in third-order logic, long forbidden due to its destabilizing effect on sentient cognition. One signal appeared, just 8 words. Yet it froze the entire core council at the consciousness ring. Core human is awake. Do not react. Only observe. No shots were fired, no threats declared. There was only one thing, a single pulse of data, beating once again to the rhythm of humanity. The data pulse resumed. But this time it didn't follow any standard galactic communication cycle. It moved against everything the Alliance's interstellar broadcast systems had normalized over millennia. And worst of all, it didn't ask permission. At the core protocol nexus of the consciousness ring, the entire security framework was forcibly compelled to open an exception gateway. The last time this gate was opened was during the neural reconstruction campaign, back when humanity was still awake. Aboard the human vessel, the first man, or the still unnamed, sat before the central comms board. No insignia, no emblems, just empty data fields where any species could theoretically embed diplomatic signals. He typed exactly 7 characters, no encryption, no decoding required. Com Prime handshake. Across the galaxy, every diplomatic node in the Alliance lit up in unison. On the Morvian ship, Tralix wept, not knowing whether from terror or from the overwhelming realization that he had just witnessed an executive order broadcast across the galaxy. One that bypassed resolutions, ignored authorizations, and reversed the very direction of power. Valen did not cry. He simply stood still. The glow inside his crystalline form slowly deepened to red, like the reflection of an invisible hemorrhage. "They're not greeting us," he said. "They're connecting. At the original protocol layer, from before language even existed. Across the galaxy, inside the Celestial Council Assembly, where hyperdimensional beings projected intellects from 4 spatial planes, An argument broke out in overlapping waves of conscious frequencies. If they've truly returned, one symbiotic mind declared, then every standardized protocol we use today was borrowed from them, and now they're not borrowing anymore. They're taking it back. At that moment, a direct signal from the human vessel was received by every diplomatic interface, bypassing the Alliance's central servers. No introduction, no translation, just one image. The first human looking straight into the lens, no smile, no threat, just a voice. I need someone who can listen. No political static, no condescending posture, no apologetic tone. We've stayed silent long enough for you to rewrite history. Now, send someone who knows how to be silent at the right moment. We will speak only once. The message ended. No sound cue marked its conclusion. No conciliatory background music. Just silence, stretching like a deep tremor beneath the moral architecture of the entire galaxy. Velan was chosen, not because he held the highest command, but because he was the only one who ever truly believed that "do not wake humanity" was a genuine warning. Tralix watched as he stepped into the transfer chamber. No weapons, no mental shields, no relay beacon. "If I don't return," Velan said, "erase my record. Don't write 'sacrificed for diplomacy.' Just write 'when to listen.'" The docking seal opened. No guards, no scanning arrays, no traps. Just a long corridor, old metal walls with welding marks still etched along the edges. Clear signs that human hands had once touched them with bare skin. Velan walked slowly, because each particle of light here seemed to scan every thought he hadn't yet dared to think. The meeting room wasn't truly a meeting room, just a wide chamber, a low table at the center, 2 glasses of water on top, no sensors, no toxin filters. A man was already seated, no nameplate, no insignia. The backlight rendered his face a silhouette, half lit, half hidden. "Your name?" Velan asked, though he already knew there would be no answer. The man replied, no smile, no anger. "You still remember?" Velan said nothing. "You erased our names from the central archives, labeled us post-neogenic biological remainders, stamped on our ship's hull, temporarily non-hostile." The human voice was low, never raised, but each word cut like a blade to the roots of a self-righteous civilization. "We didn't sleep because we were depleted. We slept to see what you would build without us. And the answer is a system built on misinterpretation, a universe run by self-deception." Velan lowered his head. He did not argue. He couldn't. In that moment he realized the galaxy was confronting the parents it had long thought dead. The man poured water into one glass and slid it across the table. "You came this far, then hear it, all the way through." The man said nothing more. He simply leaned forward, placed a single fingertip on the edge of the table, and a glowing form appeared. No projector, no modern holotech. It was a purely biological memory archive, a technology the Morvians had long abandoned out of fear. There was no video, no simulated visuals, only a voice, deep, raw, and so real it sent chills down the spine. "Year 3149, the first time we discovered what would happen if humanity kept advancing. We reached a level of thought velocity that broke through the limits of every multi-tiered model. At that point, global councils no longer debated war, disease, or hunger. The only question left was, after solving everything, what do we live for?" Velan sat in silence. He could feel every cell in his crystalline form pulling backward. We reached the summit and saw that on the other side was an abyss, the abyss of cosmic boredom. We didn't want to become immortal titans trapped in an empty room. So we chose to sleep and left the galaxy to you. A pause, then another voice, female, older, drier. We withdrew all of humanity into core vessels. Each ship carried a thread of civilization, a way of thinking. A memory Valen exhaled. The air hadn't changed, but his chest felt hollowed out. We left you the blueprints. We seeded planets with the first maps of knowledge. And then we stepped back, like parents watching their children take their first steps. The human across from him looked directly into his eyes. For the first time, not obscured by flickering light. And then you called us relics, labeled us the dormant species protocol. You called us a potential threat to be monitored from afar. Why? Because you feared that one day we might return and ask, what did you do while we were silent? Valen did not answer. He couldn't. He remembered the redacted archives, the scrubbed data, the council decisions that said, if no one remembers they were ever great, then no one will fear them again. The man spoke once more, softer this time, sadder. You didn't kill us, you just erased us, erased our names, erased us from memory banks, erased us from the historical charts, erased us from remembrance. Valen bowed his head, his voice trembling as if the crystalline structure within him was fracturing apart. I'm sorry. No, the man replied gently. Don't apologize, record it. The words weren't shouted, but they wouldn't stop echoing. The message never traveled through official channels. It spread across forgotten connections, passed through relay stations once used only for trivial broadcasts, and reached every device within a 7-galactic unit radius. And in each place it broadcast just one line. Do not erase us again. At the protocol nexus of the consciousness ring, the emergency council was summoned. No one spoke. No one used their titles anymore. Only a room remained, filled with eyes wide in panic and shame. The historical map of humanity, long buried in restricted data layers, suddenly reappeared. Automatically, each era, each entry, each invention, each time humanity quietly withdrew, leaving behind tools for the galaxy, without demanding their name be carved into the stone. They taught us how to calculate gravity when we still called it invisible sticking force. They helped the Xerac species create language emitters, only for the Xerac to use them to say humans are outdated relics. Each statement, each layer, each scar in the galactic psyche ripped wide open. Trelix, the one who fired the first scan, sat alone in the auxiliary chamber. He trembled, not from fear of punishment, but because he realized he hadn't broken a secret. He had awakened a debt. Valen still sat across from the man. He didn't speak, didn't argue. He just listened, as one might listen to someone explaining how truth was stripped and coated in the paint of false civilization. When you erased our names, the man said, you didn't just erase a species. You erased your mirror, because as long as we existed, you would be forced to reflect on yourselves. On Dallas Prime, capital of the Galactic Union, thousands descended into the streets. No protests, no rage, just silence. They sat in the central square, and they listened. From every screen, every broadcast hub, every long-forgotten data chip, the story of humanity surfaced. No one transmitted it. No one edited it. It was just memory once crushed beneath silence, now rising like groundwater after a quake. They don't want war, whispered a Talha delegate within the council. They don't seek power. They only want us to listen, truly and fully. Silence, long, heavy, until someone finally spoke. A voice from no known species. Do we even deserve their forgiveness? No one answered. That silence, what seemed like absolute quiet, was only the final shell before the galaxy began to move. Not a movement of weapons, not military deployments, not acts of retribution, but the subtle upheaval of order. It began at the core data vault of the Binaries Royal Union, a cluster of ultra-secured servers, home to all classified technology logs, from navigation energy systems to bioprogramming languages to foundational data on collective consciousness. That night, every system window lit up. No hacking, no malware, just a short command. Restore original access, root user, human code. Line by line, every bit of foundational code, once thought to be created by modern species, began revealing their original authors. And they all pointed to one place, one name, one species. At the Siren 6 communications relay station located between neutral star systems, ancient linguistic protocols buried for millennia suddenly reactivated. On the central screen, which once displayed cheery ads like, "Welcome to the age of intergalactic advancement," a single letter appeared. A language now recognized by only 0.0003% of all known species. English, one word. Rebooting. And then the dormant vessels began to stir. Not just one, not just a group, but hundreds, thousands of human vessels, each ship a fragment of memory imprisoned in the void, beginning to wake, not in unison, not by order, but organically, as if the time had simply come. Tralix stood frozen before the Morvian ship's main screen, biological activity charts, once dead straight, emotionless lines, now flashed bright red. "It's a wave," he stammered. "No," said Valen behind him, his voice bone-dry. "This is a chain reaction. A species just remembered it used to be alive, and every fragment of its memory is coming home." Inside the Galactic Interspecies Council, usually still as a tomb, tables were being pounded, not in rage, in fear. "They don't need warships," a representative from the Zarn species shouted. "All they have to do is wake, and every layer of our tech base begins reverting to their human blueprints. We've been operating a borrowed system from those who were asleep, and now they're awake, and we don't even know what we are anymore." No declaration of war was issued, but across hundreds of worlds, ordinary citizens began asking, if we weren't the ones who built this civilization, then what are we really? Memory, once thought to be the softest, most fragile element of a species, had become an unclassifiable threat to the entire galaxy. But there was still something that went beyond memory, beyond restored records, a fragment. Once stolen from the very source, it had lain still. Not on any map, not in any server, not in the mind of any leader, but within the marrow of a life form, one who had never been called by its true name. On Biomed Station Guy 27, a refugee facility lying beyond the interstellar borders of the Union, a child had just been born. Less than 12 planetary cycles ago, half human, half unknown. The mother, a human woman awakened from cryosleep. The father, a Thyssari, a species that lived through resonance with dark matter. They named the child Nalin. That night, as the wave of human memory activation pulsed across the galaxy, Nalin cried. not the cry of a normal infant, but a sound that slid across every layer of biological frequency. The station's scanners began to fail. Sensor equipment began emitting unidentified codes. Language type, unknown. Waveform, pattern, unstable. Identifier code, matches archaic protocol, human sigma 0. Nalan opened his eyes for the first time. His irises carried neither his father's nor his mother's color. They were ash silver, a shade mentioned only in myths, of the first ones, the progenitors. Aboard the Morvian command ship, at that exact moment, Vaylon shivered. Not from alarms, not from corrupted data, but from a voice, strange and yet not foreign, suddenly speaking within his mind. We were never in deep sleep. We were simply waiting for a child who could listen without being taught to forget. Back on Guy 27, the attending physician had fainted. Nalan's mother held her child in silence, tears slipping down her cheeks. She didn't understand, couldn't explain. She only knew when her child wrapped his fingers around hers. Images surged through her mind, a map of space never drawn, structures that predated the First Alliance, a human world once called home, never recorded in any archive. That's it, Vaylon whispered, the final seed of memory, not held in databases, not locked in any archive, but carried in blood. The future was crying. On Guy 27, inside a medical room never designed for deep pressure shielding, Nalan, the child with no nation, no standardized genetic code, was gripping his mother's finger. The bioscanners continued to distort. The entire station seemed to fall silent, to listen to the heartbeat that matched no known species. But not everyone listened with their hearts. At the Galactic Emergency Operations HQ, data streams from Guy 27 were encrypted and relayed to Bio-Class O Strategic Control, and within just 7 seconds the Strategic Council reached a decision. Aberrant cognition propagation potential, extremely high. Risk of triggering uncontrolled ancestral memory confirmed. Subject must be neutralized before chain reaction occurs. One term appeared in every mobilization order. Human hybrid variant, code Omega. On the Morvian vessel, Vaylon received the alert instantly. The color within his crystalline core went dark. They're going to kill the child, he said, not as a question but as a eulogy. Tralix stood beside him, trembling. He was just born. He hasn't done anything yet. He already has, Vaylon murmured. He exists. And to them, that alone is enough to justify destruction. 3 Omega-class strike teams were dispatched to Guy 27. No insignias, no name tags, no translators, only one order: terminate the phenomenon. But the moment they entered Guy 27's orbit, navigation systems destabilized. The sky twisted, plasma layers reversed direction, as if the atmosphere itself was rejecting them. One ship spiraled off course, another vanished from radar. The final vessel received a live data stream, not through comms but from within their minds. This is sovereign biological territory. The child is the future, so not a weapon. Turn back, before the fear you carry becomes the last thing you ever see. Back at Union headquarters, a wave of species began protesting the termination order. But the more voices rose, the more questions followed. If it holds memory, does it hold will? If it awakens, and who will it choose? If it is the bridge between humanity and the rest of us, then who dares cross first? By then, Vaylon was no longer a commander. He was simply a guardian of the first memory. He sent a private signal to Guy 27. Don't let them be alone. Don't let humans fight again, just for the crime of being born. No one fired a shot, but on the fragile threshold between fear and life, a choice was laid before the entire galaxy: to destroy what they did not understand, or to let it live and accept that they were never the center of the story. That question was not in any report. There was no checkbox, no response protocol. It simply fell, vertically like a foundational axiom, and struck the core of every logic system the galaxy had ever built to avoid what couldn't be controlled. On Guy 27, the child remained. No energy shields protected him, no soldiers stood guard. Only his mother, hair disheveled, eyes bruised from sleepless days, leaning against the wall of the care room, cradling the child to her chest. And amid the millions of life forms watching in silence, Nalan opened his eyes. No color, no light, just a pair of vacant eyes, reflecting everything others had once tried to paint onto humanity. No one dared to breathe too hard, not out of fear, but because that strange sensation had rippled across the shared neural network, as if the universe itself was holding its own breath. To listen to something so small, it could not be measured. And then Nalan, a hybrid child of Staku who spoke no formal language, held no citizenship in any star system, quietly lifted his hand and pointed at the sky displayed on the ceiling monitor. No one understood, no translation, none needed. That one isn't just alive, Valen whispered from the control chamber. They're calling to each other. Not by name, not by genetic code, but through memory. The one thing that cannot be forcibly copied, and which no one dares to erase again. The entire Strategic Council, the very ones who had just issued the termination order, suddenly disconnected. No arguments, no retraction, just stillness. That feeling, like standing at the edge of a cliff you thought long dead, and hearing a heartbeat from below. Not fear, but awareness. The awareness that, if we step forward, we're not killing a child, we're destroying the last chance to understand who we once were. No explosions, no declarations. Only one thing remained: an absolute stillness, as the entire galaxy realized. They had just touched something so sacred no one dared call it progress to destroy it. The silence stretched on, not for seconds, but as if time itself had been drawn into a veil so that everyone could finally see what they had long tried to forget. And then, from the very heart of the galaxy, the dreams began, not among humans, but among every other species. In the Clitheran 9 system, a Velkar linguist awoke in the middle of the night, breath ragged, eyes wide. I just dreamed. In the dream, I called out to a star for which our language has no glyph. But I named it, in English. On the floating planet Tesseract, a senior judge of the Dara species, a race biologically incapable of dreaming, collapsed mid-sentence during a trial. Upon awakening, he muttered in trance-like fragments, "Humanity will not beg to be remembered. They will let memory reach the one ready to hold it." At interspecies mental health facilities, a new term began to circulate: human memory syndrome, a condition defined by dreaming of being human, remembering things never taught, feeling emotional ties to a species never encountered. A Sarnan military officer collapsed during weapons training, drenched in sweat. "I remember dying in a trench," he whispered. "At night, in acid rain, I died protecting a comrade. named Eric. No one named Eric had ever appeared in Sarnan personnel databases, but after that day, many Sarnan began naming their children Eric, not knowing why, only that the name made their chests feel a little warmer, and the child, Nalin, slept on, peacefully, unaware that he had awakened a galaxy-wide network of cross-species empathy. Trelix wept as he stared at the sensor feed. His voice trembled. This isn't just recollection anymore. This is the resurrection of collective feeling. Valen stood beside him, eyes closed. He didn't cry. But one phrase escaped his lips, barely audible, meant only for himself. Thank you for planting the seed of memory not into hard drives, but into hearts. No decree was issued. No formal council was convened. No intergalactic statement was ever sent. And yet somehow every world knew the child must not be touched, not because of fear, but because he was a living sanctuary. On Guy 27, the mother still held her child. No shields, no weapons, just soft arms and a heart that had come to understand that what she held was not just a life form, but a breathing signal, a living summons spreading quietly. Nalin had not spoken another word, but across the stars, communication hubs began quietly rewriting humanity's historical metadata. Gone were the lines like, species human, extinct, formerly known for illogical acts of aggression. In their place, new descriptions emerged, written by no one's hand. Humanity, the seeders of memory, the ones who left heartbeats behind. The walkers through pain so that others might learn how to love. In the farthest reaches of the cosmos, systems untouched by human feet, strange echoes began to pulse. Not radio waves, not signals, but whispers. A music no one had composed, a melody not stored in any archive, and yet it played as slumbering beings began to smile in their sleep. Valen stood before a screen. His aged eyes watched as a single line of text appeared on the interface. They did not return in ships. They returned when others began to speak their name, even without knowing who they were. He laughed, softly, the laugh of one who had once guarded something sacred, and now realized he didn't need to guard it anymore, because it had taken root. Trelix stepped beside him, speaking softly. So, what now? Valen looked up at the sky, didn't answer. He placed a hand on the screen where Nalin lay, visible behind the glass, and through that surface the child's eyes met his. No fear, no blame. Just a look as if to say, we did not come back to reclaim. We came back to remind you, and we never truly left. Not with conquest, not with rewritten history, just a whisper among the stars. A species does not need power to endure, only to be remembered in the living memory of those who once called them strangers. Some stories don't end with war. They don't need victors or losers. They just need someone to remember. To remember a species that once walked the stars. Not to conquer, but to sow what could never be programmed. Memory, emotion, trust. And when they were forgotten, they did not rage. They slept. But they left behind a whisper buried in dreams that had never been named. If you, the one watching this, ever believed that humanity is more than a species, it is a living idea of memory, of hope, and of something good worth retelling. Then subscribe to HFY Stories Archives, where each story is a spark of light in the vast shadow of the cosmos. Stay with us, so that when humanity speaks again, you will be the first to hear it. Subscribe, remember, and tell the story. Because sometimes life doesn't begin with a cry, but with a call among the stars. This is HFY Stories Archives, and there are many more stories still waiting for you inside your own memory.